Thank you all very much for joining me here today for a conversation that I have very much been looking forward to. Just to give a quick bit of background for anyone joining who doesn't know Bobsled, Bobsled has built the world's first data sharing platform focused on helping data and SaaS companies to meet their customers wherever they are in any cloud or data platform. So Bobsled is a SaaS application that allows data companies to natively share into the platforms where their customers work. So be that Snowflake, Databricks, AWS, Azure, GCP, etc., without having to manage any of the infrastructure or pipelines themselves. We raised our Series A last year. We're growing very quickly, and quite a few of the world's leading data providers and software companies are leveraging us to accelerate their customer adoption, lower time to value, and minimize their cloud costs. I am incredibly excited today to have a conversation with two leaders in the data ecosystem. We'll be joined by CoreLogic's Brian Battaglia, General Manager of Property Intelligence, and Databricks' Jay Bankaria, Senior Director of Marketplace Partnerships. For those that don't know it, CoreLogic is one of the largest data providers in the world, serving as a source of truth for property intelligence for thousands of companies across the US and the globe. CoreLogic is also a Bobsled customer, which is something I take great pride in being able to say. And as for Databricks, if your company generates valuable data for your customers, there's a very good chance that a meaningful percentage of them are already using Databricks to analyze it now. Databricks is one of the largest data platforms in the world, over $1 billion in revenue, thousands of enterprise customers, and a very strong leader in bringing actual enterprise machine learning and artificial intelligence into production. Databricks recently officially launched their marketplace, which allows Databricks users to find, evaluate, and seamlessly access not just external data, but also analytics and AI products natively within the Databricks platform. So today, our conversation is going to focus on the benefits that CoreLogic has already seen by building the Databricks ecosystem. We're going to talk about how data and enterprise machine learning actually meet within Databricks. And then we're going to get a little bit into prediction of how the enterprise data industry and world are going to evolve over the next 5 years. But first, thank you very much, Brian. Thank you very much, Jay, for joining me. Why don't we kick it off? I'll send a question over to you, Brian. Maybe you can just introduce us to CoreLogic a bit and really talk about how the company has evolved over the past 5 years.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jake. And it's great to be with everyone here today. Really do appreciate it. And thank you guys for the opportunity to talk a little bit about the things we're doing with you and with Databricks. Because you guys are both a key component of the strategy as we move forward here. You set the stage, I think, pretty well with respect to CoreLogic in terms of what we do. We're the largest provider of property data in the country. To give some idea of size and scale, we have roughly about 6 billion property-related records that span back over the course of about 50 years. All of which has been unified into a common data lake on our side that we basically take a property and we have a unique identifier that we refer to as CLIP. That's kind of the way to think about that as a social security number for a piece of property. And so then any data attributes, data sets we may have related to that particular property are all appended to that unique persistent identifier. So suffice to say, we have a pretty large data set that we sit on top of that does power primarily 3 core markets, but not exclusively, but our 3 core markets really are real estate, mortgage, and insurance. But our property data is also used in a number of other ways, as you can probably appreciate, whether that be retail, utilities, telco, et cetera. There really is a wide application for what we do. So our journey, just to kind of talk about it a little bit, it's not something that's just happened within the last 12 months. We've been on this journey for the better part, I would say, really the last 5 years. The first step that we took as a company was we really did consolidate all of our data into a common data lake. That was a very significant step for us, as you can probably appreciate. We're ingesting data from thousands of sources on any given day. We are direct for source for over 99% of the data that we have. So being able to kind of take all that data, enrich it, append it, put it into one common location was sort of the basis of the journey that we started probably roughly 5 years ago or so. As we then moved forward with that journey, we started to kind of realize that, the legacy way of data, if you will, which is we would sell our data sets in bulk. We would do the traditional SFTP or API or shared file delivery, whatever it might be. And we would kind of have these big, large chunks of data that we would show up and we would put on the doorstep of our client. Might be under a multi-year contract, might be under an annual type agreement. And we would somewhat just kind of then walk away from the client. I'm not saying we completely walked away, but let's be candid, like we weren't really certain exactly what they were doing with it at all times. And we would always do our best to try to help and support, but oftentimes those data sets became overwhelming for our clients in terms of what they were able to really tap into. So as time went on, we realized one of the things we had to do was really start to help the clients understand the data a bit more in detail and understand how that data could work hand in glove with what they had in their workflow. And so we actually created our own internal platform that we refer to as Discovery, which is a bit of a data and analytics platform that we support through data scientists on our side that kind of work hand in glove with a client to help them understand, start to derive unique insights, get some idea of the depth and breadth of the data itself. But that data platform, he basically started as somewhat of a walled garden in and of itself. And so as we would get clients in, the one thing that we commonly heard over the last few years in particular, is a lot of our enterprise clients started to migrate to more of their cloud strategies, was, hey, this is fantastic. We love what you have here. But at the end of the day, I really want to do this inside our environment. I want to be able to do it where we have all of our data, where we're using data from other third parties, and we're kind of pulling all this together into these unique data science capabilities that Databricks does so well. And so that really kind of started us down this journey within the last 12 to 24 months of really becoming much more cloud centric in terms of our data strategy. Not exclusively. We will always have the platforms and the UIs that allow clients across multiple industries to access. But we do recognize that for the shift that is ongoing in the industry today, being proactive and being part of the cloud world and being where our clients are, meeting them where our clients are, is really part and parcel to what we do as a company. And so if you really kind of think about our mission as a company of making the property industry faster, smarter, the data and analytics and being where our clients are is really at the heart and soul of that. And so whether it's working with Databricks or with Bobsled, you guys are key components to that overall.
Thank you very much. It's really interesting. I think that's a really succinct way of kind of describing the journey that so many, I don't even want to say legacy companies that have very large, valuable data estates have evolved over the past few years, right? First, everyone has started with, we actually need to have a data estate and we need to make it accessible. We need to bring it into the cloud and we need to understand it ourselves. And then it seems like so many companies went on the same journey of, well, we want to build out valuable analytic services on top of that data, but kind of in isolation, right? Of we're going to build visualizations, we're going to build models, we're going to build notebooks, we're going to build query packages, but it's all really within isolation within your own environment. And I know you and I've spoken about in the past around how CoreLogic, I think before many other companies, and others are now starting to catch up, are starting to realize it actually need to be much more open. Right, that really the way things are going to scale, because all of your customers have been going on the same journey of getting their data estates in order and building out their analytical capabilities. Meeting them where they are means not within your own environment, right? And it means that you don't actually control everything they want to do with the data, but that doesn't mean that you can't influence and drive value for them and help them use it. And I'm reminded as I'm saying this, Jay, it's actually when we met, you were just kind of wrapping up building the walled garden within SMP before coming to Databricks, which they've been on that same journey of kind of understanding and becoming more open. Brian, I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit more around, I've heard you speak about it in the past, like what does it mean for a data company to be open as opposed to a walled garden, and how does that drive value for your customers?
Yeah, no, look, it's and I think that's really important too as we go forward, because that's the world we're all already in, whether we realize it or not, but certainly the world that we're going to have to embrace much more holistically as we go forward. And so what that means for us, and I like a lot of the ways that you characterize that, frankly, Jake, which is our data is going to have to be accessible to the clients where they are. It doesn't mean that we won't still have logical controls around the data, that we won't still have visibility to how the data is being utilized. We're not just going to put it out there for anyone to pick up and do whatever they want with it. That's not what it means. To us, it really means we want to be inside the ecosystem where they live and breathe and they operate every single day. And to do that, we're not going to say you can only be in this ecosystem or you can only be in that ecosystem. We truly understand, particularly given the breadth you talked about, we have thousands of clients. We have to be across all of these ecosystems, or as many as humanly possible. And that's why, again, that's why the Bobsled solution becomes so important for us, because whether it's Databricks or another environment, you become critical to that, to allowing us to really kind of automate and standardize those processes across a multi-cloud environment. You know, you allow us to basically get a deeper level of insight into how the data is being consumed across a broader array of industries that, you know, frankly, would take us a lot of work to have done the old-fashioned way. And, you know, when you think about kind of data delivery through Databricks, like, you just allow us to be that much more efficient in terms of how we're doing it, and a host of things that, you know, frankly, from a customization standpoint, perhaps historically might have been a little bit more prohibitive for us. So, you know, we see a lot of lift in being, quote, open. Open doesn't have to be a bad thing. We still have some very unique and proprietary data sets that are invaluable to the company, quite candidly, but that doesn't mean that that data can't exist inside those environments in the proper way to allow clients to do exactly what you talked about, which is derive the insights from it. I mean, that's what people want to do with data, right? They want it to help them logically lead to an answer to what their business challenge may be, to help their businesses operate more efficiently. And that's where we come in, and doing it hand in glove with them, side by side, where they live and breathe and operate every single day, is a far more effective way to reduce friction than anything else that we can possibly do from a data delivery standpoint, if we just remain in a, quote, closed or walled garden type of ecosystem.
That's very interesting. I will say, one of the things that I think is really cool about this space, and especially working with CoreLogic, is I think you're actually in front of a shift that is hitting just about every technology company. And especially, it's not just data companies, it's software companies, right? Because they went through the same journey of every major software application building in visualizations and analytics, and it's all in platform, do everything in this product, right? Whether that product was from a data provider or a software company. And really, that's just not the way the market's evolves, right? The market has evolved, and that data is powering just about every decision within organizations, but that it needs to actually flow into the organization. And I continue to be impressed and humbled by the fact that you're partnering with us to kind of continue to carry out that strategy. So that's very cool. As we talk a bit more about kind of the technical nuts and bolts of what does it actually mean to be open and interact with and deliver into these ecosystems, I tend to think of there's like a few major pieces here that it's going to be helpful and to kind of think through. So we've got the underlying technology of data sharing, right? How does data actually move from one organization into another and actually move into the analytical infrastructure where it's going to be used by the consumer? And then we have marketplaces over the top of them, which are evolving in a few different ways. And I think Databricks is taking some really interesting approaches here of actually not focusing on a traditional marketplace of saying you purchase data here, but really being a hub where you discover not just the data, but machine learning notebooks, visualizations, really assets that you can work with there. And then over all of these, what I tend to think of is the ecosystem that you're building around them, right? Of actually creating, it's not just silos, you have an open ecosystem across Databricks, and what Bobsled really focuses on is making those ecosystems come together across platforms. But Jay, it would be great if you could talk a little bit about how you see the relationship between Delta sharing, Databricks sharing protocol, and the marketplace that you've been building out so successfully over the past year or so.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Jake. I think it's twofold, and they go hand in glove, where we look at Delta sharing as an underlying protocol that powers our marketplace, with the real goal being across all three of us is how do we make it as frictionless as possible for the end customer to get access to the data in the platforms and tools and capabilities that they need. Then the marketplace and the Databricks marketplace really sits on top of that to be a storefront or catalog of sorts to really help our customers understand the different types of data products that they can access very frictionlessly within the Databricks ecosystem. And the real novel approach, as you mentioned, that when we think about these data products, is it's not just the data sets, but it's the models, the notebooks, the visualizations, and the apps that all go on top of that data as well to really power as Brian mentioned, customers' accelerated time to insights and how customers can get their answers faster. As we think about the Databricks marketplace and kind of one of the biggest boons to how we wanted to build this in the beginning was we wanted this and we designed this to help accelerate our customers as they thought about their AI strategies and their advanced analytics strategies. And to the extent that we can help accelerate their journeys along that path, that's where it's critical to have partners that can really accelerate the adoption of data into Databricks, as well as having first-class, really rich, differentiated data in their systems as well.
That's super interesting. Can I ask how much, so I alluded this a bit earlier, you've been building in this space for quite a while, right? So you were building on a lot of these assets and packaging data and ML notebooks before joining Databricks. How has the time that you've spent kind of trying to solve the problem of how do you make data easier to consume outside of your own environment really shifted over the past few years as you've been more and more successfully building in the space?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there was always internal inertia that you have to deal with in terms of kind of the legacy ways that both consumers and providers delivered and accessed data. But one of the things that I think we've all noticed, especially this year, is just how fast technology changes and how rapidly it evolves. And in that evolution, we're just seeing more and more companies doing so many more innovative things around data collaboration. And that's been critical to helping our customers adopt it, our partners integrate with us, and then us delivering that value to make sure that we provide that overall platform, the Lakehouse platform, to help our customers drive that advanced analytics use case and drive their AI strategies as easily as possible.
I think I very much agree with that. I often, when I talk to people about how Bobsled got founded, a big part of it was the first time I took a look at, I think, I know you're from Databricks and you're a great partner, but the first sharing protocol that we saw a few years ago, really coming out of Snowflake, and just having a realization of this is going to be so much bigger than people realize, right? And that technology is being a fundamental shift. And I think Delta sharing brings some really interesting and really innovative capabilities on top of it. But it is this actual, much larger technological shift that people think about. And it's really exciting to see how you've been developing the ecosystem, and Databricks in general have been bringing a lot to this kind of core technology. I mean, one of the things that I think has become super clear over the past few years is that the data platform space is not going to be a winner-take-all market, right? There is not one right cloud. There is not one right data platform. There's not one right layer of the stack for data to be worked with or collaborated with. Most enterprises that I interact with, and most I interact with, now have not only multiple clouds, they have multiple data platforms, right? So we're moving to a place in which, for companies like CoreLogic to be open, that kind of complexity for which platforms and ecosystems you interact with is growing significantly, right? It's not that you can pick one or two, it's that you really have to be in all of them, which I think is a big part of the value that we try to bring. I think one of the really interesting things about Databricks, though, is, I know I've said this a couple of times to you recently, Jay, in the past, that I think for every data platform, AI is the future, right? Except Databricks, because for Databricks, it's the past, present, and future, right? You guys have been building and productionizing machine learning since before it was cool, right? I think the first production ML pipeline I saw on Databricks was in 2016. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit, maybe Brian, about how you see Databricks and enterprise machine learning and AI being a part. What part does that play in your open strategy, and what really made you want to focus and prioritize integrating the Databricks ecosystem?
Yeah, no, look, it's a great question, and that's a topic that could be unpacked for a long time that you just kind of threw out there. So I'll try to kind of maybe crystallize it this way. One, in terms of just kind of why Databricks, right? If you look at the tool set that Databricks offers, and you just think about the capability from a pure data science analytics perspective that they afford to their clients that are building out inside the lakehouses and the things inside Lakehouse and the things that they're able to do much more rapidly, it's just, frankly, it's a bit unparalleled in some respects. And from that standpoint, if you think about a lot of what our data is utilized to do, without getting too technical about it, a lot of it really does feed into analytics and just kind of a deeper level of understanding about the property industry in general. So from that standpoint, Databricks makes tons of sense. Again, it's about, like we talked about, it's about where are our clients, and we knew kind of working with our clients, but also then working with Jay and the team at Databricks, like there's a fair amount of overlap that already exists between the clients that are inside Databricks, using Databricks every single day, and our existing clients or hopeful prospects, candidly, even too, that are out there that we want to try to pursue. So it made for a very natural alliance, just in terms of kind of how we like for our data to be utilized and how we've seen clients historically utilize it and the capabilities that Databricks provides. When you kind of shift and you talk about AI, to me, I think that's a fascinating question about what will it allow our clients to do longer term. Really, in this case, I really mean shared clients between us and Databricks, because I do think a lot of the tools that are out there, capabilities that Databricks affords to them, they're going to be rapidly trying to leverage that in making themselves more efficient, trying to figure out solutions to grow revenue more effectively, whatever their use case may ultimately be. We're going to have to kind of, and we want to kind of work with them to understand that. We're also going to, it kind of raises a whole different scepter of really understanding usage of our data in an open way, but also with a mindset around security that's tied to it. Because, it depends on sort of how far you take some of the generative AI conversation when you open up this question. At a certain point, we'd want to be very thoughtful about how clients utilize it. Now, how they utilize some of the data, and they're putting it into their own AI models, much like they would do today, and how they utilize it, but driving efficiency, improving workflow, growing their client base, et cetera. Very, very much supportive in that. But I do think, as we have probably heard very cliche, even though Databricks has been playing around with AI and ML-driven models for quite some time, the reality is that I think we're just now kind of standing on the doorstep of that really starting to proliferate in a very big way. And we're going to have to kind of see how this goes over the next 12 to 24 months as people develop their crawl, walk, run strategies around this particular topic. But for us, it's exciting because we recognize the uniqueness of our data and what that can provide to our clients as they start to develop some of these strategies and kind of further develop their thinking. But it's going to be it's going to be the proverbial multi-inning game, and we're still in the very early innings here.
That's really helpful. Jay, I mean, so from your vantage point, so we've been seeing an enormous amount of demand from the Databricks marketplace, the Databricks ecosystem from our existing customers. I think you're already driving a lot of real value. But I'm curious, I mean, your vantage point probably is better than just about anyone in the world to kind of talk through, how do you see enterprises really thinking about external data integrating into their machine learning strategies and AI strategies?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think what we see with these companies as they think about external data is really kind of, even to bubble it up a little bit, it's this unification trend of their data, their analytics, and their AI in one place to really drive those insights. So a lot of our customers, what they want to do is take a lot of this rich, differentiated third-party data and couple that with their internal first-party data. And so by leveraging kind of this lakehouse paradigm, they really are able to bring this data together, couple that with the AI workflow tools, ML, BI, et cetera, and really make that as seamless as possible. I think what we've seen the trend towards is what we would call these data forward enterprises, where they really think about how can they leverage in every aspect all of their data, squeeze all the richness out of their internal data, marry that with third-party data, and drive business decision making. And what we see is when they adopt this lakehouse paradigm and they use Databricks, it really helps power that and make sure that no stone is unturned in terms of the value add external data married with their own internal first-party data can provide.
That's really helpful. I mean, this seems like one of the cases where the ability to combine a more mature data state, back to that first part of the trend, where data forward companies finally are starting to have at least some handle on what data do we have here and how do we work with it, with valuable kind of refined data assets coming from partners, which are also data forward companies like CoreLogic, and the platforms to actually leverage them in Databricks. Seems like we're getting something in which the sum is greater than the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Right. So yeah,
agreed. I think, to that point, as is kind of just riffing off what you said, it also bubbles up to like just this broader collaboration we've seen when that sum of the parts is greater than the whole, right? When what we've seen is customers turn into partners with some of our data vendors, and vendors collaborate to create new data products. And you just see so much more innovation because of the openness, because of the ability to share data more effectively, because of all of these advanced analytics, making time to value or making idea to product, maybe weeks instead of years now. And that trend is accelerated so much because of collaboration within these types of platforms. And I've talked to Brian about this and would love his perspective as well on that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, we do spend a lot of time talking about this one, don't we? Because this is one of the things that we do get really excited about as well. I mean, it's one thing to talk about the delivery and being where the clients are and all that. And don't get me wrong, that is a key component of the strategy. But that, in a sense, I'm not trying to minimize it, that's just a change in distribution strategy. It's an expansion of distribution strategy. It's important, don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, the real value comes into a lot of what Jay just kind of articulated there, which is how do you utilize the capabilities inside Databricks? How do you leverage the ecosystem and the community that Databricks is creating to allow us to innovate collectively with our clients, but also data vendor to data vendor or a group of data vendors. And so as we've kind of been in here already, and there are some other vendors out there that are inside the Databricks ecosystem already, like it's allowing us to be far more collaborative with them more quickly, because in the, I'll call it the legacy world, which sounds like it was a long time ago. It really wasn't, 12 months ago, perhaps. You're basically sitting there taking, each one of us taking our own respective data sets, a couple of different ideas, and we might take those raw ingredients and go back into our own respective kitchens and try to make a cake out of it. And we bring it back to the client or even to each other and say, what do you think? And it's kind of this iterative process that you end up in, where we made some breakthroughs. Don't get me wrong. We've developed some good products with partners over the years and with client input kind of right there alongside it. But the ability to do that much more rapidly in real time, where you kind of are collectively all looking at the same thing, you're working in the same clean room, you're kind of operating with a whole different lens to it, so that everyone's seeing the same thing at the same time, and you're able to kind of leverage the best of all worlds. It really is starting to unlock some very, very interesting conversations that I know are leading to near-term product wins that we'll be bringing to market for our clients as well. So to me, that community that Jay kind of talked about, that is so vital and important really to the overall strategy as well, because that's really taking care, that's really capitalizing on the capabilities that are out there and the people that are also participating to really drive much more quick outcomes in today's world. And I think you're just going to continue to see that accelerate. It's going to obviously play into AI, as Jay mentioned as well. And so that's where we really start to get excited about what it unlocks for us in the future.
That's really helpful. So Brian, I'm wondering, can you give some advice to other companies that are not quite as far along in their, let's call it, move to the open strategy, of what should they be focused on in order to start unlocking some of the benefits that come from really being open to meeting your customers where they are, as opposed to either making them come to you, or to the point you made earlier on of just dropping data and hoping that they become successful with it? Where would you start? What tips would you give?
Oh, that's a great question. Because again, as you heard me kind of articulate at the top, this is a multi-year journey for us. This isn't something that we kind of put on a PowerPoint slide 12 months ago and said, hey, let's operationalize it, and here we are. This has been a series of steps that the company has consciously taken over the last several years to really have this type of a data strategy in general for us. So if I was in an enterprise that really was kind of starting from scratch, I would say first and foremost, just kind of, take a step back and a little bit take stock of where are you today, be very candid, be very honest about it. Hopefully you're pretty much grounded in your market and the needs of your clients and where your clients are going. If not, I would certainly reach out to the likes of a Jay and have a chat with him about, hey, here's kind of who we are and what we do. Can you give me some perspective of who's in your ecosystem or your general awareness about what clients like that may or may not be be doing in today's world. They're a tremendous consultative resource. Every conversation I have with them, I always learn something. And so to me, that's, you know, kind of the mark of a good partner. Then I think once you've sort of taken stock of your external environment, your client needs, then it's really about, okay, how do I get started? You know, do you have to follow the path that we did, where you kind of standardize, normalize, and consolidate all of your data into a unified data lake, and then start to go down this path, or can you do it in pieces? You know, or do you have the infrastructure to be able to support it as well? I mean, it is there's investment involved here. I don't want to sugarcoat that either. I mean, there is still some investment involved. Yes, the likes of Bobsled makes it easier for us from that standpoint, but there is still investment to be had. But I think the payoff is worth it, right? At the end of the day, because I just look ahead to data and just really where the world's headed in general. And, you know, if you're trying to drive productivity, if you're trying to drive growth, if you're, you know, whether that's through an AI, you know, driven model, or through just kind of, you know, basic operational discipline, data and analytics and the timeliness to insights is critical to all of that. Honestly, I don't know how you would do it without it in the world that we are currently in, and definitely the world that we are about to enter into. And so I think this strategy has to be something that people that are serious about data and being a data vendor of any shape or size have got to start exploring, and really, you know, take step one in the journey and just kind of take stock of where you are today and what are your client needs, and how is that starting to affect you know, your growth outlook over the next, you know, 3 to 5 years.
That's really helpful. And I appreciate the plug for Bobsled Accelerating there. If I were to just kind of think a bit around how we fit into that, because I very much agree with it, right? It's if you have these, I view it as like 3 steps, right? Of first, recognizing there is value in us being more open and interacting with ecosystems and meeting our customers where they are. And then the next piece you mentioned about being very candid with yourself around how is your existing data state. And especially for businesses where, you know, if any part of the value you generate your customers is in data, I tend to think of it as you have to make sure that you're a value, like an effective source of data. And there's a really significant amount of work that it takes to actually make sure that you're not just scalable, you understand the data products you're building, that you're not scaling just data volumes, but the number of products, the numbers of ways it can be used. You're investing in understanding how your customers want to use your data and the types of assets that you can deliver to them. What Bobsled really wants to fit in is for you not to have to waste engineering resources on, great, and now how does Delta sharing work as opposed to S3 endpoints in AWS? And let me go make sure that I'm negotiating accounts with all 5 major platforms, and that I've trained the team to build this, and that we understand the different ways that things are orchestrated, and information security, and that we have good pipelines and observability. Really what we hope to do is allow you to invest your precious time and resources and really how you add value and the data that you're generating, and understanding how to help your customers use it, not wasting time in figuring out how 5 different companies have implemented what fundamentally should be the same thing, which is a sharing function. So with that, I want to transition a bit to, I don't think there are 2 people with more experience and knowledge of how, especially the third-party external data market is evolving, to get some predictions from you. So Jay, I want to throw it to you. Can you talk through what some of the major shifts you expect to see in this market are over the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, I think the one shift that I think I've said this for a while, so my timing on this prediction may be off, but I think you are going to see a lot more companies in the next 5 years, I'll say majority of companies, monetize their data in some capacity. This isn't just the data vendors of the world or companies that have, you know, audience data, but this could be the oil and gas companies, the other companies, manufacturing companies that have never really thought about it before, but just with the power of openness, the power of the acceleration of some of these other key capabilities, we're going to see more companies monetize data much faster. And then the other prediction that I think is a little bit tangential to data, but just the more of the technology space, I think was a fun quote I heard that I think bears repeating, is that the fastest growing and the biggest coding language in the next 5 years will be English.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm gonna, man, the business of predictions is always a rocky one, right? And certainly you talk about 5 years at the velocity that things are now, it almost feels like you're asking me to predict 50 years into the future. But I do want to build, I actually want to touch on a different thought, but I want to hit on one thing that Jay said there, because I really do think he's spot on. I'm fortunate enough in the role that I'm in, I get to have a lot of conversations with a whole different variety of companies across different industries. And there are a lot of companies now that, are thinking about how do they monetize their data and should they be monetizing their data. And maybe that's almost to kind of spin your earlier question around a little bit, Jake, that sometimes is the question I get a little bit more frequently, which is, hey, given what we do and what we have, do you think that there's a need for it, or could we somehow sell it, or things like that? And a lot of times I'll be like, hey, sure, I'll take it as a raw ingredient and we'll try to figure out what to help you do with it. But I do think that is definitely a trend, that companies that have not historically thought about monetizing data, and they've just thought about as exhaust, are really going to say, how do I put a little bit of a business model around that? How do I try to get after it? Because certainly when you talk about generative AI, I mean, the models run on data, right? So the more you have, the better the models at the end of the day. So I think that definitely is a trend I completely agree with. I also think, the industry is starting down this path, but it's going to have to accelerate. I think you're going to see a bit of a convergence between SaaS and what I'll call data as a service, the DaaS model, right? It's inevitable, in my personal opinion, that as we get these enterprise clients that are now getting or will become accustomed over the next few years to having data vendors such as us and others kind of be where they are operating, where they are building their workflows, where they're doing their work every day, they're going to naturally probably extend that into, well, 5 years ago, you had this platform that I could go into and I got some really cool things out of it. It gave me some awesome visualizations and some interesting insights. How do I have, why can't I have that here inside my Databricks lake house, right? And obviously I know this is something that Databricks talks about all the time, but I think you're going to see that convergence really accelerate over the next 3 to 5 years, where a lot of the SaaS and a lot of the DaaS are going to start to come together and have to be somewhat ubiquitous inside these environments. And to me, that's an exciting proposition for all parties, to be quite candid, because I just think it hits on everything else we talked about earlier around pace of innovation, driving efficiencies, et cetera. And that trend, I think, is absolutely going to start to kind of take hold here in the future. So back to your point, Jake, about where do you get started? You're going to have to kind of get started first and foremost with just understanding where you are today, but also have a lens that of where this thing is ultimately headed. I think really kind of speaks volumes to that. Now, generative AI could change a lot of this stuff. And so who knows, 6 months from now, if we were to get the three of us together again and have a chat, maybe we'd have totally different answers. But I feel pretty confident that a couple of those things we just hit on there are absolutely going to come to fruition.
I think I'm gonna take it as a good thing that my view of the future maps so closely to an executive at one of our largest customers, that we see the future well, as opposed to feeling like, oh man, I have to come up with net new things because my view maps so closely to yours. But I mean, there's a few things that you've said specifically, Brian, I think both of you, but I want to make like even stronger predictions around. So this idea of open versus closed, like the concept of, is the data generated within your business and application built to be leveraged within the data environments and organizations of your customers, or are you forcing them to come to you? Are you building for your data to be blended as opposed to forcing your customers to think about it in isolation? I think it is going to determine winners and losers in the data and SaaS markets. Like something I think about a lot is I think the data business reminds me an enormous amount of enterprise software circa, let's call it 2010, when the software as a service model, it existed. It was clear. There was probably, I doubt there was $1 billion in SaaS done, but there were multiple major players there. And most software companies were faced with a choice. Do you maintain and fight for your margin and existing business model and not go through the pain of going to something entirely new? Or do you jump with both feet into this new, not just delivery model, but method of delivering your value, which in the case of software was the software itself, to your customers? And what we saw is the companies who jumped in with both feet are now even bigger and more dominant than they were at the time. The Microsofts, the Adobes, the Autodesk, so many others, right? They saw the shifts, and they've reacted really quickly. And those that didn't are lucky if their market caps are the same as they were a decade ago. Right. And I don't want to point figures, but everyone can think of major enterprise software companies that said, no, everyone wants something custom. This is how we do business. We're going to defend this. I think we're in the exact same position in data and to a large degree, software as a service, right? If you don't react to the fact that data is not exhaust, data is incredibly valuable, and the way that it generates value is within the organization that's going to use it. And it is by nature something that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It has to be combined with both other data sets and the tooling that customer wants to use. Like, that's a really big part. Most enterprises are spending hundreds of millions of dollars, not just on data teams, but on training them around using a specific set of tools and platforms. It doesn't matter if one's better than the other. It has to meet them where they're working. If you do that, we're going to see this massive wave of data consumption that's powering every major enterprise right now, just lift an enormous number of boats of both data companies and SaaS businesses that are able to be a part of it. And you're going to see every company that's kind of putting its head in the sand and saying, we're making a lot of money on this, and why can't they just come to my platform? Why can't they just use our APIs? Why can't they just use our visualizations? Start to lose. And I think the second thing you said, I clearly very strongly believe, because we're building a product both for data companies and SaaS businesses. Jay, I really agree with your prediction as well, that we're going to see really significant increased data monetization in enterprises. I think one of the things that people don't think about is there are multiple ways to monetize data. And what we're seeing out of software applications is today, the data generated by their users in those applications really is exhaust to them, right? We have an API because we're told we have to. If you want to get the data out of our application, first, why are you doing that? Haven't you seen our dashboards? Have you tried plugging your Salesforce CRM into our API and bringing all that data in here? Like, why don't you just use our walled garden? But if not, figure it out, right? Scrape our API, use Fivetran, use something else to rip it out. The forward companies are realizing that it doesn't make any sense, because data teams are driving technology decisions in every major enterprise right now. And that you don't have to be selling actual data. Selling access to well-structured data products that integrate directly into your ecosystem, that your data team can just start using, is actually bringing you closer to where your customers are working. And Ryan, I totally agree with you. What we're going to see is SaaS businesses and data businesses start to converge enormously. And I think we saw in the last major shift of enterprise software to SaaS, data wasn't really there. Right? You saw there were a lot of data companies that were almost the same size as enterprise software businesses, and we didn't see the same wave. I think that wave is here now. It just needed the infrastructure to evolve, right? So for SaaS, you needed the public cloud to exist. You needed the ability to deploy at scale. For data and DaaS to become something larger, you needed the data platforms. You needed the Databricks and your competitors, honestly. And honestly, you needed these sharing protocols. Like, I think the world is just starting to realize how meaningful this move to the source bringing the data where it's going to be consumed is going to be. We're about to see a massive wave of growth for companies like CoreLogic, and we're about to see a segment of data as a service just be much larger than anyone's ever thought about it before. So I'm looking forward to, maybe we can do this once a year, and we to hearing your guys' predictions. But I do want to say, really, really appreciate not only joining today, I'll say, Jay, your continued partnership with Databricks. It's fantastic. Brian, more than anything, your trusted Bobsled as your data sharing platform, as we integrate into more and more destinations. It's been an incredibly exciting journey to get to where we are now, and I cannot wait for us to be building together for those next 5 years. Thank you both very much.
Likewise, thank both of you. Appreciate it.
Same here. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.